So I've said on a handful of occasions that the Psalms are a sanctuary, if you will. They are a safe place where we can come as we are, not as we should be, and bare our souls to God. I love the realness and the rawness of the Psalms. They are a place where we can express ourselves truthfully, honestly. They give us permission to feel joy, to feel fear, to feel anger, to feel wonderment and frustration and grief and gratitude and desperation and anxiety and love and longing. Almost every human emotion is expressed when you make your way through the Psalms. They give us the okay to cry and to laugh and to doubt and to question and to scream and to be silent. The Psalms give us a very realistic look at life. They don't shy away from the hard stuff. They speak about life the way that it is, not necessarily life the way we want it to be. They embrace, as I've said before, the Psalms embrace a low anthropology. And what that means is that they expect fallen people to fall down. They expect broken people to break down. They expect sinners to sin. The Psalms are not surprised by sin. They're not shocked by sin. They assume it. They assume that we are needy, desperate, broken down people. And so Psalm after Psalm speaks into that condition. They give voice to things like failure and fear and uncertainty and powerlessness. They acknowledge that we are weak and weary, prone to wander. They admit that life is hard, that pain is real. But they also announce that grace abounds. They give us words when we're thankful, words when we're sad, words when we're scared, words when we're mad and confused and happy. The Psalms give us words when we can't find the verbiage. When we're feeling a certain way because we're facing certain things and we can't find the verbiage, we can't find the words. The Psalms are a gift to us because they give us the words that we can't come up with on our own. Psalm after psalm is a maskless expression to God about the way life actually feels. I love that. There's no pretending here. There's no idealism in the Psalms. There are no masks here. Psalm after psalm after psalm is a maskless expression to God about the way life actually feels. They allow us to feel what we're feeling without apology, and then to channel those emotions toward God, to channel those emotions Godward. And in granting us this allowance to feel what we're feeling, this allowance to express ourselves honestly and truthfully across the emotional gamut, in giving us this allowance, the Psalms prove that God is no stoic. They prove that he rejects the stiff upper lip, never let them see you sweat or cry approach to life. Sometimes that's what we think constitutes muscular Christianity, strong Christianity. That we just have to sort of stoically announce that God is in control, and then we think we're being super spiritual by denying the fact that life is hard and pain is real. And so we're almost encouraged in a variety of different circles and in a variety of different ways to be stoic about the real pain that affects real broken people like you and me. And yet psalm after psalm proves that God is no stoic. He does not endorse this stiff upper lip, never let them see you sweat, never let them see you cry kind of approach to life that oftentimes we are encouraged to embrace. They prove that he is not a tough, get over it already kind of God. They prove that. Rather, in Psalm 23, it says he walks with us through the valley of the shadow of death. He's not standing outside the valley of the shadow of death going, come on, chop, chop, let's go. What's taking you so long? Don't you trust me? Don't you love me? Don't you believe me? Let's go. That's not who God is. He gets in it with us. As I've said, he doesn't stand at some antiseptic distance from our sin. He meets us in it. in our weakness, in our pain, in our difficulty, in our frustrations. Psalm 46 says that he is an ever-present help in trouble. It doesn't say that he will always rescue us from it, but it does say that he is our help in it. Psalm 120 says, I call on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. You see this in so many different Psalms, the fact that God meets us in our messes with his mercy. He meets us in our troubles with his comfort. The Psalms show that God doesn't stand at a distance from wherever we are. Rather, he's always right where we are. Always. His goodness, as we looked at last week, his goodness and his mercy chase us. They hound us. They harass us all the days of our lives. Well, Psalm 42, as I mentioned, has always been one of my favorite Psalms because it's just so raw. It's so real. We don't know who wrote it, but whoever wrote it is in distress. This person's in trouble. They're feeling it. And they're feeling the frustration of God's apparent silence. They're feeling it. Their circumstances are closing in all around them. They're feeling externally oppressed, and they're feeling internally anxious. They are in a variety of different ways. This person, this psalmist, is expressing real disappointment with God. A number of years ago, Philip Yancey wrote a book entitled Disappointment with God, which I highly recommend to you. It's a real honest look at why God so often fails to meet our expectations. Well, this is kind of what's going on here in Psalm 42. God, in some way, shape, or form, is failing to meet this psalmist's expectations. When people have asked me in the past, what is a Christian? There are a variety of different ways that I've tried to answer that question, depending on who's asking it. But one answer that I've always given, in fact, I used to give this answer to my kids when they were small. If ever the conversation would come up, and in the course of that conversation, they'd say, Dad, what is a Christian? I would always answer them from verse 1 of Psalm 42. I used to say to them that a Christian is one who pants after God. It's one who thirsts for God. It's one who recognizes their need for God. It's one who admits their desperation without God. A Christian is not one who has it all together. A Christian is one who is free to confess that they don't have it all together. That's the difference. And I get that from Psalm 42. As a deer pants for the water brooks, so my soul pants for you, O God. I need God. I can't go on without God. Where is God? A Christian is one who recognizes just how hopeless life can feel without God. Now, we don't know who wrote this psalm, but it was, as I said, clearly written by someone in dire straits. It was written during a season of desperation and despair. This guy, whoever he is in deep distress, and he begins with this cry for God. The imagery that he uses is the imagery of being spiritually worn out and dried up. He's panting. He's thirsting. He's emotionally dehydrated. He's mentally parched. He's out of it. He needs help. And he cries for God because he knows that God alone offers the rest that he needs and the replenishment that he craves. But what's causing even more distress, whatever his circumstances are going on around him that are causing him distress, he's going through a difficult, painful, hard season in life, and he's feeling emotionally dehydrated, he's spiritually dried up, he's mentally parched. He recognizes his need for God. He cries out for God. But what's causing even more distress than that is that God seems so distant from him. In the second part of verse 2, after he says, my soul thirsts for God, for the living God, he says, when shall I come and appear before God? rightly translated, what that really means is, when will God hear me? When will I get an audience with God? When will he pay attention to my troubles? When will he give ear to my hurts? Where is he? God seems absent from whatever he's experiencing. He was feeling what the Puritans used to call God's dreadful withdrawal. The Puritans used to talk about God's dreadful withdrawal, where it wasn't a real withdrawal, but it was those seasons in life when God felt far away. It's not that God was actually far away, but he felt far away. It's not that he was actually silent, but he felt silent. It's not that he was actually indifferent, but it felt like he was indifferent. God's dreadful withdrawal, those seasons of life where God seems distant, detached. We've all been there. I mean, I find myself there on a regular basis, where God just seems far away. I know he's big, I know he's strong, I know he's in control of all things, and I know that he could bring relief with the blink of his eye. And he doesn't. Why? I know that he could bring help, that he could relieve me of whatever I'm facing, and oftentimes he doesn't. Why? Where is he? God's dreadful withdrawal. And this causes for the psalmist a profound sadness and a sense of deep hopelessness. Verse 3 is powerful. My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? What he's saying is, my tears have words. With every shedding of every tear, there is a shout. Where are you, God? Where have you gone? Why are you ignoring me? Why does my situation seem so irrelevant to you? Why do you seem so uncaring? I'm in a fetal position in the corner, sucking my thumb, weeping day and night, all day long. And God, you don't seem to care. This is what he's facing. This is what he's dealing with. Notice what he does in verse 4. This is something that I have been guilty of and find myself on a regular basis being guilty of. In the midst of his pain, he romanticizes his past. He's remembering when life felt good. He's remembering when life was well-oriented and well-ordered. He remembers how he loved his responsibilities and how he felt useful. Look at what he says in verse 4. These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. I remember when God seemed so thickly present. And when I was a leader amongst God's people and life was good, God seemed to be smiling and I was feeling his pleasure. I remember those days. And those days seem far, far away, he's saying. Part of what's causing his pain is the contrast between the way life used to feel for him and the way life now feels. He is feeling very alone in his pain, alone in his ache, alone in this world. He remembers a time when life had meaning, when life was enjoyable, when he felt purpose, when he felt useful. So not only does this psalmist feel alone, he feels useless. I have felt both of those things very tangibly. Where not only do you feel alone, I've told this story before, but when my life was crashing and burning in a big, catastrophic, and public way 7 years ago, I was experiencing the crucible of ache in a way that I had never experienced it before. And I remember being at a stoplight near where I lived and looking to my left and looking to my right at the people in their cars and thinking to myself, these people have no idea just how on the edge I am. These people have no idea. I was thinking to myself, their life, whoever they are, is so much better than mine right now. I feel alone. I don't feel like anybody can truly understand. They're not feeling what I'm feeling. They haven't experienced what I've experienced. I feel alone in my pain. Alone. And at the same time, all of the responsibilities, both personally and professionally, that I had were seemingly swept away. And so I felt useless. Useless, not only alone, but useless. Who am I and what am I going to do with my life? This is one of the reasons why this is now one of my favorite Psalms. I can relate to this so well. Post-trauma, I can relate to this so well. It reminds me of Psalm 55, where the psalmist says, listen to my prayer, O God. Well, listen to these words, okay? I mean, I'd love, if I had a few more weeks, I would do Psalm 55 too. Listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my plea. Hear me. Answer me. My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught at the voice of my enemy, at the stares of the wicked, for they bring down suffering upon me, and they revile me in their anger. My heart is in anguish within me. Who's felt that? The terrors of death assail me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, oh, that I had the wings of a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert. Who hasn't felt like that? I just want to run for the hills. I want to go away and never be found. I mean, you ever feel like that? I have. I still do sometimes. I have cried out to God many, many, many times, begging him to break his silence, to hear me, to help me. I have felt paralyzed by aloneness, crippled by fear, hopeless in the wake of personal collapse. I have lived with the incapacitating dread that I would never enjoy life again, ever. That my best days were behind me, and that from this point forward, life was about surviving and not thriving. I have felt useless. I have felt worthless. I have felt unwanted. I have felt anonymous. I have felt rejected by others and by God. I have yelled the same words that the psalmist yells in verse 9. Why have you forgotten me? Psalm 42, verse 9. What does he say? I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Now, I love the first part of verse 9 because there's something almost contradictory happening there. On the one hand, he's acknowledging who God is, that God is his rock. He's not saying, well, because of my trouble, I don't believe in God anymore. He's clearly not the genie in a bottle that I thought he was, granting me all of the wishes that I want, and so therefore I don't believe in God anymore. I am now renouncing belief in God, and I am now professing to be an atheist. There is no God. That's not what's going on. He still believes in God. It is possible. In fact, it is probable. I would even say it is right for people who know God to argue with him, complain to him, lament, be honest with him, tell the truth, take your masks off before God. Some of my realest conversations I've ever had in my life have been with God, where I'm shaking my fist and going, listen, I know you're there, and that's part of my pain because I know you can do something about it. I believe in you, but I don't like you right now. I'm frustrated. Why have you forgotten me? So many times I have felt like that. So many times. I mean, do you ever feel like God has forgotten you? Like he doesn't care about your trouble? Like he's indifferent? If you have never felt like that, you're lying to yourself, okay? Have you ever felt like he's against you rather than for you? We get all of these pious platitudes from our Christian friends about just trusting God. You know, God's doing good things. And that kind of stuff just makes you want to punch him in the face. I mean, you're just like, would you shut up? I don't believe, it doesn't seem like he cares right now. So don't come at me with your pious platitudes trying to convince me that God really likes me. I think he's against me. I mean, that's just honest. And you see those kind of, you see it right here. I mean, if we think that it's somehow bad to be honest with God about the way we feel, we're going to have to rip the Psalms right out of the Bible. Because here he is saying, God, I believe in you, but why have you forgotten me? This is exactly the way the author of this psalm felt. Why have you forgotten me? Why? Now, I am fully aware of the fact that it is totally natural to ask why when we are going through hard and scary stuff. Why me? Why now? Why him? Why her? Why this? Why God? Why? I think that's incredibly natural. It's normal. We're going to look at that in much more detail when we look at the book of Job. But what I've discovered is that focusing on why makes a huge assumption. Focusing on why assumes that information has the power to heal. That if I just knew why this was happening, then the pain would be easier to endure. If God would just give me an answer, if I could just somehow attain the information that seems to be missing, then life would feel good again. I would be able to endure my pain and my difficulty. But we know that information cannot mend a broken heart. We know that. We'll see this in the story of Job, that even if God had told Job why he was suffering, and he could have said, Job, listen, I didn't tell you this ahead of time because I had a bet going with the devil, okay? But I didn't tell you that's not exactly what was going on, but we'll get into that. I wasn't going to tell you this ahead of time for that reason, but I do want to tell you now that you've sort of gone through it all, there was a reason behind it, you know? The devil came to me and he was questioning your faith and questioning why you loved me and saying the only reason that this guy loves you is because you've given him so much stuff. So I gave the devil permission to take away your stuff to prove that you love me for me. And you passed and everything's good. Now, he could have answered Job's question, why? Because Job asked this question in 1,000 different ways in Job. Why have you forgotten me? Where have you gone? Why is this happening? Why now? Why them? His friends were asking the same questions. And God could have answered Job. But even if he would have answered Job and told Job why he was suffering, Job would still have had to deal with the loss of his health and his family and his wealth and all of that stuff. Information doesn't eliminate the loss, doesn't eliminate the pain. You see, the truth is we may never fully understand why God allows us to suffer in the ways that we do. Never. We may never understand it. And there's probably not going to be necessarily the silver lining that we want there to be. We may never know why we are allowed to experience what we experience, go through what we go through. But we don't need answers as much as we need God. Which is why the psalmist ends by saying, my hope is in God. This is what he's saying. I don't understand what's happening, and I really don't understand why it's happening, but God absent as he seems right now, is ultimately my only hope. Where else am I going to go? There is no other stream. He is my strength, my rock, my deliverer. I don't understand what he's doing, and I don't like what he's doing or not doing. But this I know, he is my strength, my rock, my deliverer. He's come through for me time and time and time again. Remember when Jesus' disciples, when Jesus says to his disciples, because they're getting persecuted for their following of Jesus, and people are leaving Jesus left and right because his teaching seemed so off the wall. And Jesus looked at his disciples and said, are you guys going to leave also? And Peter speaks up and goes, where are we going to go? I mean, you alone have the words of life. We may not understand what you're saying. We may not understand everything you're doing. We don't understand your agenda. But we do know that there are no other options. There is no other stream. So he's saying, God, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't like what you're doing. You seem far away and indifferent and silent. But at the end of the day, you are my only hope. You are my strength, my rock, my deliverer. You have come through for me time and time and time again. He says that as I look back over my life, I see how you've come through. Well, I look back at the times in my life when God seemed far and indifferent, and I see now that he was right there the whole time. Loving, protecting, caring, providing. Jenna and I were talking about this on the way to church. She's doing Harbor this morning, so she said, what are you preaching on? I'm not going to hear your sermon. I said, no, this afternoon you're going to sit on the couch and watch the entire thing, the replay. I'm just kidding. And you're going to take notes. But she was like, what are you preaching on? And I told her, and I kind of explained summarized the sermon. And she says, when God seems far away, how do you know he's not? And one of the things I said was, because if he was, I wouldn't be here right now. I mean, how many times have I said this? I've stood on this stage and said this to you guys, that I am here and alive and standing before you today, not because in my darkest, most painful moments, I held on to God. I'm alive and here and standing before you today because in my darkest moments, God never stopped holding on to me. It's not my faith that got me here. It's God's faithfulness that got me here. I mean, I have been so destructively and embarrassingly faithless in painful seasons of life, where my default mode, my instinct, the spontaneous instinct was, when life feels like it's going out of control, do everything I can to regain control of it. I mean, it's like I can say what I'm saying and believe what I'm saying, and the moment the right circumstances feel like they're cramping in all around me, I default right back to, I have to be my own God, because no one else is looking out for me. And so I look back over my life and I go, man, I have blown it. I have not believed. I have not been faithful. I've struggled. I've questioned God. I've experienced a variety of valleys of the shadow of death. And even though at the time it seemed like God was indifferent and God was far away and God was silent, I can now look back like he does here. I can now look back and go, God was there the whole time, protecting, caring, doing things behind the scenes that I couldn't see, readying people and circumstances all around me, protecting me from things that I didn't even know I was needing protection from. I mean, what did we sing earlier? Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Well, he believes this. He knows that. He can't see God, can't hear God. He's frustrated with God. But he knows that somewhere out there in the darkness, God is there. And God is working on his behalf. He trusted that God would come through for him at some point. And the cross, many years later, shows that he did. Robert Capon puts it this way. On the cross, God came to us in the brokenness of our health, in the shipwreck of our lives, in the loss of all peace of mind, in the very thick of our sins. He saves us in our disasters, not from them. Christ on the cross meets us in our suffering and conflicts, not in the promise to take them away here and now. He is simply with us in all of our times, he says. You see, he knows, and I love Hebrews chapter 4, verses 15 and 16, two verses of tremendous comfort for weary saints. It says, for we do not, speaking of Jesus, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. What's he saying? Well, he's saying Jesus knows what it feels like to be misunderstood. Jesus knows what it feels like to be betrayed, to be conspired against, to be abandoned, to be judged, to be mistreated, to be lied about. He knows. I mean, if you've ever felt betrayed by a friend, he knows what that feels like. If you've ever felt rejected by people that you love, he knows what that feels like. If you've ever felt like God was silent, he knows what that feels like. If you have felt mistreated, if you've been lied about, if you know what a broken heart feels like or what it feels like to be alone, he knows it too. He's experienced the gamut of brokenness. He came into this broken world and lived his life amongst broken people. He has been through it all. He is with you right now. And while he may not deliver you from pain and loss in this life, he will be with you in the thick of it all of it. He knows. The cross is God's answer to the question, why have you forgotten me? And it's God's shout, I haven't. I've been there the whole time. And I'm doing things you can't see, and I'm working in ways that you can't discern, but I'm there. I've always been there. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I'm not gonna rescue you out of the valley of the shadow of death in this life, but I'm with you in it. We were talking last night about failure and weakness and what a gift those things are. We tend to think that failure and weakness are our enemies. And while failure in and of itself is not good, God does promise to bring great good out of it. He promises to showcase his strength in and through our weaknesses. He's there. Even when we don't see it, he's working. Even when we don't feel it, he's working. He is there. He's always been there, and he will always be there. Let's pray together.